Hello, welcome back to a mystery channel. Today I have the honor of being here with Mildred Shears, and she is a wonderful pioneer woman who may not even describe herself as that, but I have been completely inspired by her presence and her wisdom and her story, and I would love for her to share with you today something significant that's happened in her life and her turning into the woman she is today, and I will turn it over to her and close it out at the end. So, I welcome Mildred.
Am I there?
You're there.
Thank you very much, Erin, for asking to hear this story. And this is not written. It is not something that I can look at and read and remember, oh yes, this is what went down. But I will start with when I was growing up. I was part of a family of 10 children, being the third oldest. And we lived in a small town in North Dakota. And we had the very good fortune of having a woman who was an only child, single, happened to be a clerk at the post office where my father worked as a mailman. And she sort of took some of us under her wing and taught us piano lessons. And I remember going to her house regularly. And it just came to me. One of the things that I used to do when she would still be at work is I would go into her pantry and have the most delicious oatmeal cookies. And I often wondered if she counted the cookies before she left and when she got home. But she lived in the upper story, second story of the house that she owned. And I remember one day when I was at her house practicing piano, she was in the kitchen with my older sister working on algebra. And I went out onto the porch and I started talking to myself. And I said, when I grow up, I was 8 years old now at this time, when I grow up, I want to be a nun who teaches music. And then I forgot about it. However, by the time I got to be 14, I told my parents I wanted to go to the convent, which I did. And at that time, women as young as, or girls as old as 14, could go to the convent and become what would be called an aspirant. And so for my last 3 years of high school, I lived at the convent, living as if I were being trained, which I certainly was. After which, I had what's called the novitiate, trained to be a religious person as a novice. And then after 2 years in the novitiate, became what's called first professed, taking vows for 3 years that I will spend the rest of my life being in this community. After the 3 years, then taking what is referred to as permanent vows, which I also did. However, as time went on, it became clear to me that there was a discrepancy between what we professed to believe as nuns and how we all behaved, because there was a lot of being human that went into being a nun. And at some point down the line, I did become a music teacher. And in a year when there weren't enough nuns teaching to go around to fill all the slots, as a music teacher, I got switched to teaching first grade. And one of the events that made a huge impression on me was there was a little boy in the first grade who in these days would be called mentally challenged. And his name was Freddie. And one of the things that was difficult for Freddie was reading. And he would try really, really hard. One day, when Freddie had read his sentence out loud, the whole class of first graders said, "Sister, Freddie can read." And there's a connection between Freddie learning to read and my awareness. Oh, one of the things I do is teach these children, in preparing them for their first confession, that they're sinners. This didn't work for me anymore. And I then had about 2 years of very serious depression, at the end of which I had the privilege of being able to be at a psychiatric unit where the doctor agreed it was not good for me to be a nun anymore. And one morning when I was putting on my habit, still in the hospital, the thought crossed my mind, I could be putting on something else. And that is what started my leaving the convent.
What happened afterwards?
Well, I left the convent. My younger sister, one of my younger sisters, was at the same time taking her profession. And my parents had come for the celebration, and I said to my dad, "How would you like to have one of your daughters back?" And he said, "That would be wonderful." So I got encouragement. When the actual time came to leave the convent after having been in the hospital, I went to visit a younger brother who was then a seminarian. And the morning after I was there, I was in the chapel, and I was the only one there, and I heard footsteps, and I said to myself, I know those footsteps. Those belong to the Monsignor who works in the parish, because I was familiar with him. He was a really fine musician, and I would have him come to play for the children, and it would be like a music appreciation day. I told him, I looked around and found it was him. I went back, asked him, could I speak with him? He came to the back of the chapel, and I asked him, I need information on what to do to get out of the convent. It has been very difficult, and I need to leave. His first words were, I never would have guessed that, but I know what to have you do. And he gave me the information I needed. I went to the bishop, wrote a letter, experienced much what I would call disregard from the Mother Superior and disbelief from fellow sisters in the community. But nevertheless, I did what I needed to do. And since then, I have had no regret. I do other things with my life, and I have made it a really important point to help the grandchildren that my husband and I have adopted, to make it clear to them that they are not sinners. They may do things that they regret or would be harmful to themselves or others, but to face it as that, not as being a bad person.
And what would you say to any women that are looking to find their voice and follow their heart?
If I were in that position, I would first ask them to get in touch with what are they saying. The awareness of what am I saying to myself is really, really important if you need to change your position. You first have to get clear with yourself. Like, very, very fine example, for me in the last few days, and it still happens, I have a husband who is very concerned that I stay in good health. I am gone from the house all day, every day. And he has said, I will fix your lunch. I'll put it in a container. You can take it and eat it when you're gone. And my first thought was, oh my goodness, I don't have to have him choose what I'm going to eat for lunch. But the minute I had the thought, wow, I'm probably the most fortunate woman in town, having a husband that fixes her lunch and gets it warm. What a privilege. The way you think about it makes a difference.
Any final thoughts?
No one can tell another person what's right or wrong for them to do. Finding support to help you sort what you're thinking and really recognizing life is not what we were told it would be. Life is not what we want it to be much of the time, but it is the way it is. And how I talk to myself about it is what makes a difference.
Thank you, Mildred.
You're welcome.
Well, thank you for sticking around for this beautiful story. I've felt so privileged to know Mildred, and I really feel that it's important that we all do find our truths and we take that time to know what we'd like to say and speak it and follow our hearts and trust that there will be support along the way. So for all the women and men out there that are working with maybe some doubt or fear of the situation you're in or not wanting to speak up, we're out here. There's a lot of people that are loving and kind, and we're all here in this together. So thank you for watching. Aloha.